Similarly to last week's episode, though we didn't get much concrete action, we were absolutely spoiled in density. Though this episode most definitely had its fair share of writing issues, I'd be lying if I said I didn't still love it. I will say, however, with only 2 episodes left for the season, the writers have been spending an awful lot of time on setup and filler over these past 2 episodes. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump into the episode itself. We begin with the Lannister army reaching the edge of the Riverlands, but refusing to progress without Aemon and Vhagar by their side. This likely stems from the reports they've heard of what happened at Rook's Rest, coupled with their fear of Daemon and his dragon being stationed in the Riverlands. This hesitancy from the Lannister army absolutely infuriates Aemon, who we find is quickly settled into his regency. His frustration isn't just with his own forces, however. The Black faction blockade of King's Landing has caused his anger to flurry. The Green and Black factions currently find themselves in an interesting dichotomy. The Black faction has barely any land forces, but has an incredibly powerful maritime fleet behind them. The Green faction, on the other hand, has a robust land campaign underway, but has practically no oceanic presence. Though the Green faction has tried to contact House Greyjoy multiple times, they haven't had any success at getting through to them. Desperate to break the Black faction blockade, Aemon expresses a desire to make an alliance with the Triarchy. If you recall, throughout most of Season 1, Westeros was in an unofficial war of sorts with this alliance of 3 city-states over in the eastern continent of Essos, fighting with them over control of the Stepstones, a series of islands bridging the gap between the 2 continents. Keenly aware of this past dynamic, Alicent presses the foolishness and fruitlessness of such an endeavor, but is swiftly ignored by Aemon. Aemon has seemingly had enough of Alicent being a part of what is now pretty firmly his small council. Once the rest of the members leave, he fires Alicent from her position outright. In response, Alicent calls him out for his behavior, audibly realizing that the bullying and neglect of his childhood are still driving all of his decisions today. Alicent isn't the only one having an increasingly difficult time with Aemon's regency, however. Unlike Aegon, Aemon sees right through Larys Strong's attempted manipulations, not only insulting Larys and denying him handship, but ordering him to contact Otto Hightower about returning as his hand instead. Larys clearly realizes that Aemon's reign would not be a hospitable place for a schemer of his nature. Seemingly genuinely worried about his status, we see his stoicism lapse when he visits the suffering Aegon, entering a space of what appears to be genuine emotional vulnerability, something incredibly rare for Larys. After all, he really does need Aegon to heal if he wants a chance at staying in power. Interesting enough, in Larys' monologue, we hear what might be a hint that Alice Rivers was the one who brought him into this world, further adding fuel to the fire of the theory that she is much older than she seems. We see that, though Aegon has regained some form of consciousness, he still sleeps the majority of the day and will forever be disabled. He does, however, have enough mental wherewithal to try to convince Aemon that he remembers none of what happened at Rook's Rest, surely fearing for his life if he said otherwise in such a vulnerable state. Contacting Otto won't be an easy job for Larys, as Otto seems to be missing outright. Alicent has sent letters to both Highgarden, where she recommended he visit, as well as his home in Old Town, but has heard nothing back. Later in the episode, she even asks her brother Gwaine if he's heard from him, but to no avail. I do wonder if Otto's disappearance has anything to do with the uprising from House Beesbury that we heard about in this episode. Although they are a vassal house of the Hightowers, the Beesburys are still salty about the murder of their Lord Lyman, who, if you recall, was killed by Criston at the Green Council for speaking up in defense of Rhaenyra. Under Aemon's orders, Gwaine and Criston are reluctantly setting out for Harrenhal. Though Alicent rightfully ignores Criston, she does have a heartfelt pre-departure conversation with Gwaine, in which they talk about her son Daeron. If you recall, he's the additional 4th child she had with Viserys that, after not appearing in Season 1, was unsubtly retconned into the canon of the show. Having been raised away from King's Landing in Old Town, he seems to have grown up to be a genuinely good person. This partially relieves Alicent, but also serves to confirm her internal fear that she is partly to blame for how her children turned out. Having been removed of her council responsibilities and still filled with guilt over the neglect of her children, Alicent invites Helaena to join her in praying at the Sept. Their prayers are briskly interrupted by a riot breaking out across King's Landing, all thanks to the work of Rhaenyra and Mysaria. But before we dive into that plot, let's take a quick step back. Over on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra's struggles over the management of her council have reached a climax. Early on in the episode, she attempted to have her guard Sir Steffon Darkland become Seasmoke's new rider. She cites a Targaryen marriage into the Darkland family generations ago as a reason he might be genetically able to ride a dragon. However, Seasmoke refuses the attempted bond, burning Steffon Darkland and some dragon keepers to a crisp. I wonder if the reason for this disconnect is due to the proximity of the bloodline having been so far removed. Perhaps dragons require only 1 or 2 generations of genetic proximity in order for the bond to work, but this is all pure speculation. This loss, coupled with the continued lack of support from her council, leads Rhaenyra to snap and smack one of her counselors in public. She realizes that her lack of decisive action has caused her council to look down on her, something she plans to swiftly change. Together with the only council member she seems to still trust, Mysaria, the two hatch a plan to solidify the support of the King's Landing Smallfolk by sending a myriad of small, unmanned ships carrying food past the blockade. The chaos of competition to get to said food, coupled with the growing fervor for Rhaenyra, causes full-scale rioting to break out across the city, which Alicent and Helaena narrowly escape. In the backdrop of the brewing riot, we see Ulf the White at a tavern eating by himself. Dining there at the same time as Sylvie, who, if you you recall, was the prostitute that Aemon had been venting to. She clearly stirs the pot, shitting on the Green faction leadership and further bolstering Ulf's positivity toward Rhaenyra. Back to Rhaenyra, she and Mysaria seem to be developing an incredibly close bond, one that unfortunately seems to be growing mostly off-screen. Though their kiss was by no means an unwelcome addition to the narrative, I wish their burgeoning romance wasn't so rushed and underdeveloped. Sure, we got a lot of bisexual subtext from Rhaenyra and her teenage friendship with Alicent back in season 1, but all that does is set up Rhaenyra's sexuality, not this specific relationship. I really think the two needed more screen time together that was less political and more personal in order for this plot thread to work. Additionally, the two kissing right after Mysaria shared a disturbing and traumatic story from her past felt very uncomfortable. We find out that the origin of Mysaria's throat scar is from her abusive father, who, after raping and impregnating her, tried to kill her. As you can see, this is most definitely not a story that would get someone romantically or sexually worked up. Before I get into the episode's climax and ending, I want to go over a few additional developments. Over in the Vale, Rhaena is having a hard time adjusting to her new life of forced travel. Though Jane Eyre informs her that Prince Reggio of Pentos is happy to take her and Rhaenyra's sons in, the news doesn't spark the joy in Rhaena that Jane expected. You see, earlier in the episode, Rhaena stumbled upon the remnants of what is clearly a full-grown dragon's presence in the Vale. Perhaps Rhaena would rather linger in the Vale and attempt to claim this dragon, rather than setting off to a whole other continent so quickly. Without giving any book spoilers, it seems that they're giving Rhaena the plot of a book character named Nettles. This is very disappointing, as Nettles was one of my favorite characters in the book. She added a lot of thematic resonance to the story, and served as a huge mover of conflict and narrative for other core characters. If my suspicions of this character condensation proved to be correct, it would be such a shame. Meanwhile, Rhaena's father Daemon's struggles at Harrenhal seem to have come to a head. His visions continue to erode his sanity. Haunting him most this episode is his brother Viserys, giving us Paddy Constantine reprising his legendary performance. We are shown the immense guilt Daemon still feels for not being a supportive brother to Viserys, especially after the death of his wife and infant son back in the first episode of the show. This seems to be the snapping point for Daemon, who, after assaulting Simon Strong, sets off to flee the castle. During his attempted departure, we see his dragon perched right next to a weirwood tree. I wonder if the dragon had been sleeping there, unintentionally allowing magic from the tree to seep into his brain, and, due to the psychic bond between dragons and their riders, over to Daemon. Before Daemon can get to his dragon, however, he is stopped by Alice Rivers, whom his desperation comes out full force to. After humbling him a bit, Alice promises to help solve his problems if he stays at the castle and does nothing for 3 days. Absolutely mentally broken by this point, Daemon agrees, and Alice's promise indeed comes to fruition. We hear later in the episode from Simon Strong that Grover Tully, the extremely ill leader of House Tully, has passed away. Though Simon says that Alice visited Grover in an attempt to heal him, it's clear from all the context we have that she actually was there to hasten his death. You see, with Grover out of the way, Oscar Tully can now take action, uniting the Riverland houses in support of Daemon. Having been so deep in the depths of desperation, we see Daemon break down in tears after receiving this news. To end this episode breakdown, let's talk about the Hull brothers, Alan and Adam. Despite Alan's hesitancy, Corlys has ordered him to serve as a leader in the Black Faction fleet. Though Corlys says that Alan earned this role by serving well in the Stepstone Wars, it's likely a result of Corlys feeling guilty for not raising up his bastard sons. Alan clearly wants nothing to do with Corlys, rejecting the role until it is established to be in order. We even see Alan shaving his head, embracing baldness over the gold-white hair that would show everyone his true heritage. His brother Adam, on the other hand, doesn't understand why Alan is so rejecting of Corlys' favor, as he hasn't been shown any of it himself. Still, Adam finds himself embraced by another important figure when he is later chased down by Seasmoke. If you recall, this dragon used to be bonded with Laenor. Seasmoke seemingly chooses Adam as his new rider, likely sensing a strong genetic connection with his former rider. At the episode's close, Rhaenyra is informed that someone has claimed Seasmoke. Though we know it to be Adam, she assumes it to be a member of the Green faction. Having firmly decided she will no longer listen to the hesitancies of her council, she sets out on the back of her dragon herself to confront Seasmoke and his new rider. Anyway, that about wraps up this breakdown. If there's anything you think I'm going to miss or any questions you might have, be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and like to see future episode breakdowns, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next week for the penultimate episode of the season.